We're glad you've joined with us today for our Bible study. We're in the book of Acts. We're going chapter by chapter. We started out with this idea. When Jesus Christ was resurrected on the third day from the grave, he spent time with his disciples. There were over 500 people that witnessed that Jesus had come back to life. Well, what we're trying to look at in the book of Acts is how the continuation of the gospel continued to develop even after Jesus ascended back up into heaven. So that's why we're trying to see that this is the way we're supposed to live. These are the things we're supposed to do, because Christianity was a continuation of the life of Jesus Christ. So these principles that are found in the book of Acts can be applied to our heart, our life, the way we do things today, because it's called the church age. And that's what we're living in today. The church age is going to come to an end one day. When Jesus Christ comes again in the clouds, he's going to call every believer up off the earth, and we're going to ascend with him back up into heaven. We're going to live with him eternally in his presence. It won't be the end of the world, because Jesus one day will come back, and he will set up an earthly kingdom here on this earth. When he does, we will be with him. We will rule and reign with him for over 1,000 years. So this old world is not going to be done away with when Jesus descends in the clouds. And we're going to reign with him and rule with him all of that 1,000-year reign. What is he doing? In my opinion, when he reigns upon the earth, he will show all kingdoms, every nation, what the world could have been like had man never sinned in the Garden of Eden to begin with. So in the book of Acts, we see the way these early Christians lived. We should apply these principles to our life today with the idea in mind: the coming of the Lord Jesus is at hand. He is coming again. So let's look at how we should be living in these last days. When you look in the book of Acts at the life of these early believers, what we find is those who were of the way, which is Christianity, they were persecuting. The Apostle Paul was persecuting. And that's what we're in the middle of right now, is looking at his life and how he was living in those last days. So we've come to the 25th chapter. Paul's been in prison. He has been beaten. He has suffered. And so in chapter 25, I want you to listen to what happens. 3 days after Festus arrived in Caesarea, by the way, that's where Paul was from, to take over his new responsibilities, he left for Jerusalem, where the leading priests and other Jewish leaders met with him and made their accusations against Paul. What we see is Paul is on trial. He's on trial because he's turned away from Judaism. He has turned to the Lord Jesus Christ, and he is living for the Lord. And here's what it says in verse 2. Where the leading priests and the other Jewish leaders met with him and made their accusations against Paul, they asked Festus as a favor to transfer Paul to Jerusalem. planning to ambush and kill him on the way. But Festus replied that Paul was at Caesarea and he himself would be returning there soon. So he said, those of you in authority can return with me. If Paul has done anything wrong, you can make your accusations. So they're telling them that if you have accusations against Paul, come and go with me and you can make your accusations. Verse 6, about 8 or 10 days later, Festus returned to Caesarea. And on the following day, he took his seat in court and ordered that Paul be brought in. When Paul arrived, the Jewish leaders from Jerusalem gathered around and made serious accusations that they could not prove. So they were accusing Paul of things they could not prove. That's what we see. Verse 8, Paul denied the charges. I am not guilty of any crime against the Jewish laws or the temple or the Roman government, he said. Now, how would Paul know? Because he was a devout Jew. He was a very trained man in his day in Judaism. And he knew if he had violated the law or not. So Paul has denied the charges. I'm not guilty of any crime. Verse 9. Then Festus wanted to please the Jews and asked him, are you willing to go to Jerusalem and stand trial before me there? And Paul replied, no, this is the official Roman court. So I ought to be tried right here. You know very well I'm not guilty of harming the Jews. If I have done anything worthy of death, I don't refuse the charge. But if I am innocent, no one has a right to turn me over to these men to kill me. And I appeal to Caesar. Festus conferred with his advisors and then replied, very well, you have appealed to Caesar, and Caesar, to Caesar you will go. A few days later, King Agrippa arrived with his sister Bernice to pay their respects to Festus. During their stay of several days, Festus discussed Paul's case with the king. There is a prisoner here, he told him, whose case was left for me by Felix. When I was in Jerusalem, the leading priests and the Jewish leaders pressed charges against him and asked me to condemn him. I pointed out to them that Roman law does not convict people without a trial. They must be given an opportunity to confront their accusers. And I did not delay. I called the case the very next day and ordered Paul brought in. But the accusations made against him weren't any of the crimes I expected. Instead, it was something about their religion and a dead man named Jesus who Paul insisted was alive. I was at loss to know how to investigate these things. So I asked him whether he would be willing to stand trial on these charges in Jerusalem. But Paul appealed to have his case decided by the emperor. So I ordered that he would be held in custody until I could arrange to send him to Caesarea. I'd like to hear the man myself, Agrippa said, and Festus replied, "You will tomorrow." And so, this is part of the trial, the accusations that's being charged before Paul. So we're going to look at that as we continue our study tomorrow, and we hope that you'll be with us to follow along and to see what happens when Paul has to face his charges. Thank you for being with us today.